Okay, Erev Tov. Just before we get going and address the sheet in front of us, it's very difficult to not mention the momentous losses that Klal Yisrael suffered over the weekend. Of course, over Shabbos, Rav Sachs, Alav Shalom, and on Sunday, Rav David, Rav David Feinstein. Yeah, I had Baruch Hashem the honor to not know them. I don't want to say I knew them, but but our paths crossed and to meet them on a couple of occasions, and they were extremely special individuals, and it's mamash a loss for Klal Yisrael, and I hope our the Jewish community can find replacements as difficult as it is for such great men and such great losses, and they did a lot for Klal Yisrael, and Be'ezrat Hashem will find the strength to carry on their great work. Okay, we also at the beginning of this week's parsha fits right in. It's also about loss. We suffer the first loss of one of the founders, of course, of our people. We suffered the death of Sarah Imenu, and that's that precipitates a lot of things. In other words, it's an interesting phenomenon that the death of Sarah trigger all sorts of things. The first thing it triggers, of course, is the first acquisition of land in Eretz Yisrael, which that's number one, and that's very significant. This Shabbat, historically in Hebron, is a very moving event. I was there once. I'm glad I went there once, but I wouldn't do it again. A lot of things in life, you do it once and you say, oh, okay, that's enough. It's like I went to Meron. I went to Meron for Lag BaOmer once. Oh, okay, that was enough. The crowds and the pushing, and I can't do without. My youngest daughter went there many years, like 10 years in a row, to Marat Machpelah on Shabbat Chaye Sarah. It's very moving. It's very moving. I don't know what it will be like here in the year of COVID, but it's a special thing. So that's the first thing that the death of Sarah triggers, and the next thing that the death of Sarah triggers is the need for Avram Avinu to get to work on the continuation of the nation by finding a shidduch for Yitzchak. So that's like the next step. And at the end of that very long chapter, oh man, somebody's not letting me admit them. Okay, I think it worked now. Okay, sorry. This is the longest chapter. Chapter 24 is the longest chapter in Breshit. Okay, I think it's the second long. The longest chapter is in Naso, in Bamidbar. But I think this is the second longest chapter in Chumash. It's a very long story, of this interaction with Avraham's Eved, we assume Eliezer, but Avram's Eved in Aram Naharayim, getting the Basherta for Yitzchak Avinu. I mean, we have to make this shidduch. So we are now looking at the end of that parak. So the first thing that happens is Avram Avinu has to get a kever. The next thing that happens is Avram has to get a wife for Yitzchak. And then the end of chapter 24, Yitzchak comes into the scene. Yitzchak, who at this point in his development is still a very passive character. And at this point, Yitzchak ba mi bo. It's hard to translate that. I have Rabbi Kaplan's translation in front of me, and it says, he has it, Yitzchak was on his way coming from. I'm not sure that's the best translation. Ba mi bo. He's coming from his coming, sort of. He's coming from the fact that he was someplace. And where was he? He was at this place called Be'er L'chai Ro'i. He's at this place called the Be'er, the well or the spring of the living site, the site of the living. And this is where the Malach appeared to Hagar. So we've already seen back in chapter 15 that this place has appeared already. And Yitzchak, well, we'll talk more about it in a minute. Yitzchak found this place significant. We'll talk more about that in a minute. V'hu yoshev be'eretz haNegev. And he's living in the Negev. So Yaakov, excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying Yaakov. My son is on my mind. He's Yaakov. Abraham and Yitzchak and later Yaakov live in two places. They live in Hebron, but they also live in Beersheba. And Beersheba, of course, is the northern edge of the Negev. Normally in Chumash, when we say Negev, we mean further south than Beersheba. We, in modern Medina, say, oh, Beersheba is the Bira, the capital of the Negev, but that wasn't, it's Tzvon HaNegev, but in those days, Negev meant south of Beersheba. And we don't know exactly where Be'er L'chai Ro'i is. However, there is an opinion that it's Ein Avdat. I'd love to think that this opinion is true. Ein Avdat is just south of Kibbutz Sde Boker, which of course is famous because that's where Ben Gurion lived, and that's where he's buried, and they have a museum that's very nice, worth visiting if you haven't been there before. And it's right off the road when you're going between Beersheba to Mitzpeh Ramon. And it's a beautiful hike. And there in the middle of the desert, there's a waterfall and there's a pool, and it feels like a miraculous place, you know, surrounded by desert, and there is this beautiful source of water, and it's just gorgeous, except for the signs that say don't drink the water because it's polluted. But except for those signs, it's really cool to go there. I'd like to think that that's the place because it's just such a magical location. It's almost like a scene from some adventure movie, like maybe Indiana Jones or something. You go through this canyon, and then you get to the canyon, and at the end there's a waterfall, and it's beautiful. And then there's a pool, and it's just a remarkable place. But it seems that Yitzchak was connected to this, and we're going to see in the next chapter. Well, we're not going to see it. I'm just going to tell you. But when we read the Parshat this week, pay attention in chapter 25. Later, Yitzchak goes to live there. And we'll talk about that in a minute because we'll see what the Me'or B'Shemesh and the Shadal say in just a minute. V'yetze Yitzchak lasur baseda. So what happens is, at this moment, he's coming back from having been in this deep Negev location where there is a miraculous water source, and there is still this sense of something living appeared there, a malach, an angel of God, okay? And he comes from that place, and then he davens. Lasuf v'sadeh, to literally to converse in the field. If you want to know about this pasuk, I wrote about this pasuk in my weekly article. So if anybody wants it, I can send you by email. So I don't want to talk much about the davening, but he comes out and he davens. Lifnot erev, towards the evening, and of course we say he invented mincha. He lifts up his eyes after he's finished davening, I assume, and he sees camels coming. The tisa Rivka etenahu. He looks up. This is almost like a scene from a movie, right? He looks up, and then the cameras switch, and she looks up, and then the violins stop playing, right? Everybody's got the scene, okay? The Teirat Yitzchak, he looks up, he sees camels. She looks up and she sees Yitzchak. She had a better view, I guess. But tipol me'al hagamal, and she falls off her camel. Now, this is a big machloket. We're not going to talk much about it. I'm just going to quickly, it's an argument. Some people really think she fell off the camel because Yitzchak was quite a sight. It was very moving or disturbing, whatever. Or it was she alights from the camel and she wants to be respectful when she's going to be informed in a moment that this is the son of the servant's master and her bashert. So it's so that we're getting ready for that moment of the first meeting, the rendezvous. Okay, and of course we've got the servant, perhaps Eliezer, he's there to keep an eye on the kids. Okay, so anyways, that's the scene before we get to the next pasuk. But now I want to do two maporshim on that pasuk, and we'll try to set the scene. But I have to give you the background that is very disturbing, and I don't think is pshat, but it's important and it's famous. That when you had a Kedat Yitzchak, according to the Midrash, Yitzchak Avinu was 37 at the time of the Akedah. The news of the Akedah kills Sarah. That a devil came, a Satan came and told her, and that kills Sarah. I don't think this is pshat. This is the Midrash. Okay, the pshat is the pasuk calls him a nar, so he should be 13. So what happens is we have the story of the Akedah. Then, right after the story of the Akedah, we have this genealogy with the birth of Rivka. So the Akedah does something to Yitzchak. The news of the Akedah kills Sarah, and at that moment, Rivka is born. So that when 3 years later, because we don't know how old anybody is when Sarah was 127, but we do know that from next week's Parsha, that Yitzchak Avinu gets married at the age of 40. So he's 37, 40, and she's born at that moment. So this comes up with the famous Midrash that she's 3 years old at the time that she marries Yitzchak. This is not pshat. It's very problematic because she has to feed 10 camels and do all of these things. And I don't care how precocious you are. My grandchildren are extremely precocious, and none of the 3-year-olds could do any of that stuff. But you can say it's a miracle, whatever it is, okay? Gail, you're not saying anything. Even our 3-year-old couldn't do this. But okay, so what happens? So anyway, so what happens is that's the famous Midrash because they want all of the storyline to be tightly connected. And we want a special connection between Sarah Imenu and Rivka Imenu. We're going to talk more about that connection when we get to the next pasuk. Okay? I have to be the Grinch here to say that this is not pshat. Pshat, I am firmly convinced in the psukim of the Akedah, Yitzchak is referred to as a nar. A nar is 13 and a half, between the ages of 13 and 14. Over and over again in the story of Rivka and the servant, she's referred to as a na'ara. A na'ara is between the ages of 12 and 13. Her first year after bat mitzvah, and a nar the first year after bar mitzvah. So the pshat would be that the Akedah took place when he was 13 years old, and his mother, Baruch Hashem, lives another 24 years, and that Rivka at the time of the shidduch is 13, and he's 40. So even between 12 and 13, and he's 40. So even though that age gap to us seems, untenable, in those days it wasn't considered so untenable. Women did get married at 13, 14, 15. I was just reminiscing with Rivka this afternoon while we were walking around. We had a close friend in Stanford who was born in Iran, and his mother married his father, and his father, this was the second marriage. He was in his 50s. His mother was 14. So a 54-year-old man married a 14-year-old girl in Iran, and that was not considered to be outrageous, even though to us it is. So, and that was in the early 20th century, or early to mid 20th century. It's a little older than I am. So, but it's so her being 13 and him being 40 is not outrageous to the pre-modern world. But her being 3 and him being 40, okay, that's outrageous. Okay. But let's take a look first at the Me'or B'Shemesh. Me'or B'Shemesh is a Hasidic Rebbe that lived in the early part of the 1800s. His name was Epstein, Kalman Clonimus Epstein, Halevi. And he said, he's talking about Yitzchak coming from this Be'er L'chai Ro'i, from the Negev, this amazing place, okay? V'hu Yoshei Be'eretz, and again, he lives in the Negev. So what's going on? The Midrash Rabbah, the Midrash explains to us. Me'hechan ba, where was he coming from? So he's coming from his coming. So we've got a double arrival. So where was the first arrival? He had to go from point A to the Be'er, and then Be'er, point B, to point C, which is probably outside Beersheba, which is probably where the story takes place, although some people say Hebron, but we're not, it could be either, okay? Depends what time of the year. In the wintertime, the Avot were in Beersheba. In the summertime, they were in Hebron. It's like New York and Florida, right? Lahavdil. So anyways, so where was he coming from? Ba Meha HaMoriah. He, according to the Rabbi, he was 37 at the age at the time of the Akedah, which is the Midrash, which is the popular position, and he had never gone home. He was on the move since the Akedah until this moment, and he was alone. Well, we'll see. Maybe he wasn't totally alone, but he wasn't at his mother's levaya. He wasn't at the kavura. He didn't sit shiva with his father, according to this, which seems to be a normative position within Midrashic Judaism. Wasn't that 3 years earlier? No, for 3 years he's wandering. For 3 years. So Duk for 3 years. For Tishkach od b'midrash hadiskela ba mibo ata mimita. He's coming from death. That like part of him died at the Akedah. So he's like coming back to life. Now, this whole idea that he was on his own for 3 years is based on one of the last psukim in the Akedah. And I'm just going to read to you from the end of last week's Parshat. And it says, the last verse of the Akedah, so it's chapter 22, verse 19, Vayoshav Avraham el Na'arav, and Avraham returned to the lads, the other 2 young men that went with them from Hebron to the Akedah. Those 2 young men who stayed probably near my house here in Talpiot. It's probably where they were hanging around, waiting for Avram Avinu to go to Har Moriah, Rabbi, and return. But it says, yeah, Avram Avinu returned alone. Where was Yitzchak? He disappeared. And apparently he disappeared for 3 years. The event, the trauma of the Akedah was just too much for him. And he disappears for 3 years. And apparently he goes to this Be'er. Who's at the Be'er? Okay, well, we'll come back to the second. Umufarish, I'm back in the Me'or Shamish. Umufarish, Mehar Maria, Kloma al Yedei HaAkedah, Shenekad Ba'ar Maria, Mishom Zakali Dabek Ba'alma, Uldudukra al Kach Zakal Zibud. He couldn't get married until he had the Akedah and recovered from the Akedah. That he wasn't Ra'oi, fit. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to get married. I mean, look, we all know young men who aren't ready to get married until, their late 30s, their 40s. We see this. This is something that's not unknown, but Yitzchak was very spiritual, and he just wasn't ready to get married until the near-death experience of the Akedah. Then he's ready to get married. So that's what the B'Shemish Rav Epstein says. Let's do the Shadal. Shadal Shmuel David Lutzato, an Italian scholar, rabbi and scholar from the 19th century. And he's more of a Pashtan. He's closer to literal meanings of the text. V'yitzchak ba mivo. He's also concerned about this funny language. He came from his coming. Chazah Chazar lebiram mevi shahalach lebe'er. So he's coming back from being all the way south at the be'er. V'hinei hadavar kasher. It's a difficulty. Mat tzorich lahagid zeka. Why do I have to say it here? V'dai hayosh yomi v'yetze Yitzchak lasur b'zeh. Could have just said he comes out in the field. Why do we care? We see him now coming out into the field to daven mincha. Isn't that enough? Why do we have to say where he was before he davened mincha? Why? Why is that important? Umato elet sheneda hechan halach kodem lekach. What's the purpose of knowing where he was before this? V'nirin hadvarim shahaya Yitzchak ish kadosh. He was a very holy man. I think everybody agrees with the Shadal. Yitzchak is a very holy man. He loved being all alone. This word has come to mean meditation. He loved solitude. He loved being by himself. His davening was hitbodedut. It was just him and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't have a minion. It was just him and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It was really meditation, solitude with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But he was preparing before he came into this field, David Mincha. He prepared for this at that holy place. He went to this holy place, and that prepared him for his meditative solitude with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lo dienu zeh idim hakatuv lagid ki kva halach litbodei etzel ve'el l'chayrov. To let us know, he began the meditation earlier there. Asher acha came And he later is going to live in that location, as we know in chapter 25. He lives there. That's where Hagar had the malach and told her to go back after Sarah kicked her out the first time. She's pregnant, and the malach says, "Go back." Biser Oto al Leidat Yishmael, where she gets the name and the information about the birth of Yishmael. About Ribor Zaro, Ukvutam Vaslachatam, and how he's going to have a lot of kids and be very powerful and successful. Now that he also wants to get married and have children, he also wants to get the bracha that went to Yishmael of being the father of a great nation. And now it's immediately going to be answered. So he makes it sound, Luzzatto makes it sound like, unlike the midrash that Rav Epstein was talking about, that he had been there for 3 years, he makes it sound he just went there now. And this meditation was getting him ready to meet his Basherta, his one that had been chosen by heaven for him, getting ready for the Shidduch, that this was preparation for this meeting. And that, I guess, he knew about it. According to Luzzatto, he knew about it. But who's at Be'ir L'chai Ro'i? Probably Hagar and Yishmael. And that maybe, if you want to believe that he spent 3 years there, maybe he needed the support after the trauma, PTSD of the Akedah. He goes there and gets emotional support from his older brother and his father's other wife. It seems like there must have been something to that. And he goes back there later. And he definitely reconciles with Yishmael. He didn't make it to the funeral of his mother, but he makes it to the funeral of his father together with Yishmael. When in a few years, that happens as well. And all of this is in chapter 25. So it's fascinating what's going on in the background, but spent too much time on that. But what's important to us tonight is the actual shidduch, that the two of them get together. And this is the famous last pasuk in chapter 24, which is, V'yivyeha Yitzchak ha'ohala Sarah imo. And Yitzchak brings her to the tent. Now I'm going to say of Sarah, his mother, but we're going to see in a few minutes, we're going to see another parish that's going to say that's not what it means, but okay, let's leave it this way. V'yikach et Rivka v'tilo l'isha, and he takes Rivka for a wife, to be his wife. V'ye'ehava, and he loved her. And he loved her. V'yinachem Yitzchak achrei imo, and after 3 years, we know he was 37 when his mother died. That may or may not have been the year of the Akedah. But she was 127 and he was 37. We know he gets married at 40. For 3 years, he was never reconciled. He found no comfort for the death of his mother until he brings Rivka into his home. And this precipitates a famous Rashi based on a midrash. So I've got the Rashi at the bottom of the page. And then underneath it, I've got the full version of the Midrash Rabbah that Rashi's based on. And let's do the Rashi inside the Midrash Rabbah. I'll do outside. Be'yivyeha ha'ohala, and he brings her to the tent. V'na'asit dugmat Sarah imo. Don't read the pasuk that he brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother. Read it, Yitzchak brought her to the tent and she becomes Sarah, his mother. And we'll see the English commentary on the back page is going to emphasize that idea. We'll come back to it. Kloma, Bahari Sarah Imo. She is Sarah Imo. Now, if I were a mystic, that's not like if I were a rich man, but if I were a mystic, what I would say to you is, it's very, somebody wants to get in and I can't. Oh, there it is. We would say that the story, the juxtaposition of the Akedah, the birth of Rivka and the death of Sarah, all those three events being connected to each other is to let us know that Rivka is born at the instant that Sarah dies, because the neshama of Sarah inhabits the body of Rivka. Rivka is Sarah. We would say in modern English, the reincarnation. It sounds like, sounds like the Dalai Lama. But we believe that that's, the mystics, the Kabbalists believe that that's true. The Mekubalim really feel that that's the reason that those stories are connected. And that's what Rashi isn't saying outright, Dugri, but he's hinting at, okay? He's alluding to. Aha. And now he's going to prove it based on the Midrash. And what's the proof? Shekolzman, Shesara Kayamet, that all the time that Sarah lived, near Dalut Me'erev Shabbos L'erev Shabbos. Obviously, Sarah Imenu lit Shabbos candles. I mean, without question. Okay, that's actually in next week's Parsha. That it seems to say that the Avot kept all of the Torah before it was given. So, okay, so that it shouldn't amaze us. So Sarah Imenu lit candles, and every Friday she'd light the candles. The next Friday night, miraculously, she'd have to put out last week's candles so that she could light next week's candles. They stayed lit from Friday night to Friday night. So she had to put them out so that she could light the new candles. That's the first one. Ubracha mitzuya be'isa, and there was a blessing in the dough. Now, we don't know what this means, that there was, when she baked challah, Erev Shabbos, there was a blessing. What was the blessing? Well, we're going to see an interpretation on the backside, and I'm going to give you another interpretation. But somehow there was a bracha in the dough. For me, bracha in the dough means it tastes good. But here we're going to see that there's more. Okay. In the third miracle, Ba'anan kashur al ha'ohala, and there was a cloud that was attached to the top of the tent. When you saw the tent, you knew from a distance where the tent of Sarah was, because there was this cloud hanging around over it. If you read Al Cap when you were a kid, like I did, there was a character, I forget his name, that always walked around with the cloud over his head. It was always like raining on him. I don't know if it rained all the time on Sarah's tent, but there was this cloud over it. And this, okay, we'll talk about what the cloud was in a second. And when she died, Mishemeta Pasku, all these miracles went away. Ukeshabat Rivka Chazru. And as soon as Rivka entered the tent, the miracle started. I guess immediately the cloud came. I don't think she was baking challah that day, but next time she baked challah, it was blessed. And when she lit Shabbos candles, they lasted all week. So now all those miracles went away and came back. The interesting thing about the Rashi is that when you look at the original text of the Midrash underneath, there's a fourth miracle. It's just interesting. In other words, Rashi only lists 3 miracles. He misses out the fourth. The fourth one in the third line is talks about that the tent was always open, and when she died, the tent like closed up. But that fourth miracle doesn't get mentioned in the Rashi, and I think there's a reason for it, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But first, flip the page over to the second parish on the backside, which is the Shem Mishmuel. The Shem Mishmuel. Again, a Hasidic Rebbe. This was written at the beginning of the 20th century. Ubracha Matsuya Be'isa. There was a blessing in the dough. Who Ke'en Shahaya B'Mishkan Shenishtalcha B'Rabba B'Lechem upon him. Bracha B'Lechem upon him. And the same thing happened to the lechem upon him in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash. What was the blessing of the lechem upon him? The special showbread that was baked every Friday and placed into the Beit HaMikdash, into the holy of the Beit HaMikdash, into the Heichal. What was the miracle? That they would bake it on Friday, but not eat it till the next Shabbos. As they bake it on Friday, on Shabbos morning, they push the new chalot onto the 12 racks on the golden table inside the Beit HaMikdash, and the week-old chalot would fall off, and the Kohanim, who were on duty, would eat the challah, the 12 chalot from last week, 8 days ago, and it was always fresh. That's the miracle. So the Shem Mishmol is saying that bracha of divine sodium benzoate, that preservatives in the dough, that bracha, that's what was going on here. I remember one of my Rebbeim, and I have to apologize, I can't remember when I was years ago learning this, one of my Rebbeim, it might have been Rabbi Bezdin, Olav Shalom, but one of my Rebbeim said, he gave a different shot. He said that the bracha on the dough was, no matter how many guests came to the tent, there was always enough bread. That the bracha on the dough had to do with the hachnasas orchim, the hospitality. And that's the same deal with the sides of the tent always being open. So according to this particular rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Bezdin. It's important that we say things in people's name, and I'm not sure 100% if this was the one who taught it to me. And so therefore Rashi didn't give the fourth miracle, because according to this pshat, the miracle of the dough and the miracle of the doors being open for guests were both a miracle of hospitality. And therefore you don't need both. You only need one. So Rashi, who always tries to be very succinct, didn't want to, have the extra thing to remember. I thought about this, and you can, that's a wonderful shot. I'm gonna make a suggestion very quickly. I think Rashi I'm agreeing with that shot about the dough, but I think that the reason they didn't want a fourth is because 3 is like a magic number. What were the 3 miracles? The first one is the candles. The candles were lit. What are candles? Ein ner el Torah, ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. So that the candles being lit represent Torah study in the tent. What's the cloud? The cloud represents avodah, divine worship in the tent, davening. And the dough represents hospitality in the tent. So you got the 3 major pillars of Jewish life. You've got Torah, the candles, avodah, the cloud, and Gemilat Chasadim, the kindness and hospitality of feeding all of the wayfarers that go by the tent. So the 3 give you the 3 amudim, pillars of our faith. And so that's why Rashi only has these 3. In the time we have left, okay, I hope I left myself enough, I want to talk about the love affair between Yitzchak and Rivka. The language is a little bit funny. Look back at the pasuk for just 1 minute. It says, "Vayikach et Rivka," he takes Rivka, but tehi lo leisha, and she becomes for him as a wife. V'ye'ehav, and he loves her and vayinachem, he was comforted after his mother. I mean, this is, I wrote Dear Old Mom at the top of the page. It sounds very much like that song we remember when we were kids. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad. And it's like, that seems to be what he wants. That seems to be in the pasuk what he wants. But what is going on with this relationship? So go to the back of the page, if you don't mind. And the first one I want to do is the Nitziv. There are 4 commentaries. He's the third one down. The Nitziv is Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. Rabbi Berlin was the Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. I've mentioned before, but he had 2 sons. One of them was Chaim Berlin. And Chaim Berlin, of course, there's now a yeshiva on Coney Island Avenue in Brooklyn, named Chaim Berlin for that son. The other son made Aliyah. His other son's name was Meir. And Reb Meir came to Eretz Yisrael and decided to Hebraicize the last name Berlin and changed it to Bar Ilan. He's Reb Meir Bar Ilan. Bar Ilan University is named after the second son of the Nitziv. So he had his Haredi son and his Dati Le'umi son. So, okay. He also had 2 wives. They had different mothers, which may reflect their different philosophies in life. So the Nitziv, who is the progenitor of giants in modern Judaism, okay, writes the following: V'yikach et Rivka, he takes Rivka. What do you mean? What does he mean he takes her? So he says, Kotcher Shenit, to be'emet kedusha eved, b'tor shlichut lo mahani. Now, in other words, he's marrying her now. Don't think that the Eved, probably Eliezer, when he gives her all those gifts, that he is acting as an emissary and it's a marriage by proxy. No. The Nitziv is explaining that she's only getting married at this point. Until now, she was still a free agent. She had agreed, and she, it wouldn't be nice if she reneged, but she wasn't yet married until this moment. So that's the first part. What's the next part? The next part is the second paragraph in the Nitziv, and he loved her. The fact that they're husband and wife doesn't necessarily mean that he loves her. Ein hochacha she'ahava. The fact that they're husband and wife that's no proof that they love each other. I mean, we know that's true. I mean, that's not always true. Not talking about us. All of our marriages are wonderful, but it's not true that always that just because they're married that they love each other. Chaye haya muchrach lise'ena ki lo benakel yimatzeh betula mimishpato davka. He had to marry her because it was clear she was the right one. They went back to the old country to get her, and she, they had to find someone of the right age that was from the right family, and it was clear that he had to marry her. But he marries her, but the Baruch Hashem, he also loved her. Mishum hachi yitzroch hakatuv lefaresh shenimtza mimenu korat ruach me'ahava ad sheba hinachem etzviten shemo. But he finally found his true love within her. And it's very romantic and it's very beautiful. That, in other words, it's sadly true that many times there are loveless marriages. And sometimes we even view them as successful. But in this case, there was not only the marriage and the partnership in the mission of Abraham and Sarah, but there is as well true love. And that's very beautiful and I think very important. And the third thing that happens, first is he marries her, he fulfills his obligation to the family, then he mamish loves her, and this love finally frees him from the 3-year funk he's been in because of the death of his mother, and he can now move on, and Baruch Hashem become the second of our avot. The Kedushat Levi at the top of the page, again, that's Rabbi Yitzchak Levi of Progenitor, says something similar. And I want to do them quickly because I want to leave time for the parish at the bottom of the page. Yesh l'dakdek, ma ba lahashmi enu sheYitzchak v'yavir Yitzchak v'yitzil Elisha v'yeva ahavet Rivka. What's it teaching us that tells us that he loved her? So here's a point of view is different. There's two kinds of love. We use the word love very loosely, and it's not, and it doesn't always mean the same thing. But generally speaking, the Kedushat Levi, there's two kinds of love between men and women. What are the two kinds? Ishtav ta'avat gufaniot. Shalo, Sha'al Yadezem, B'mele Tavat Kimin says that, Eno Ohev Ishta Klau, Rak Ohevet Atzma. He says many times, a man loves being married because he loves his wife, because of the ta'avat, the physical attraction and the desire. And then he says something I think is important. When that's all you get out of the marriage, you don't love your wife, you really love yourself. Because that's what all you're looking for is your own gratification. However, that's not true in our case. And I'm now at the end of the third line. V'yesh adam she'oev ishto ve'eno matmat tavat guf she'mali tavato. It's not because of any physical attraction or physical love. Rak matmat shehi Kli lekayem al yada mitzvat habara yitbarach yibarach shemo kemo she'adam ohev sha'a mitzvot zeh nikra ohev et ishto. But he says there's another kind where the wife becomes a partner in your spiritual journey, and that's what we have in our case. And only because he loved her as someone who could share the spiritual journey, only then does he feel that he has gotten over the mourning, which lasted for 3 years, for his mother. Because Yitzchak always viewed himself as part of the commitment of Abraham and Sarah to the mission of developing Am Hashem. And so he can only feel truly fulfilled and truly comforted if he knows that he has found a woman who is going to share in this mission together with him. And then he's truly fulfilled. So we see the Netziv and the Kedushat Levi writing about almost 100 years before. The Netziv, they both are emphasizing the word love, but they're two coming at it from different angles. The English commentary at the bottom of the page is actually a friend of mine. His name is Ezra Bick. I feel funny calling him a friend. We were friendly in YU. We were quite close, but I hardly ever see him anymore. But he's a Rebbe at Yeshivat Har Etzion. He's a wonderful, wonderful person and a really fine scholar. And he writes this idea at the bottom of the page about these topics we've been discussing. Hence, impressed with the Evid's proof of Rivka's personal credentials, Yitzchak brings her into the tent. In other words, he's again looking at our verse. He brings her into the tent. Why does he bring her into the tent? Because Eliezer, the Evid, has said, wow, she's special. She not only gave me water, but she gave water to all the camels, and she invited me for lunch, and she's just got all of these great midot. And so, based upon that recommendation, he takes the chance and brings her into the tent. But now Rabbi says something interesting. I do not think this is a particular tent which had belonged to Sarah. and had been waiting empty for the last 3 years. He disagrees with the normative approach that this had been the tent of Sarah and had been closed up tight for 3 years, waiting for the person who would come and Ke'ilu say open sesame, right? And replace Sarah in this, in this important and special place. He doesn't agree. And he says, the grammatical reading of the text leads you to stop after the word tent. So now if you read the verse, the V'yeha Yitzchak ha'ohala comma, Sarah imo. There's no smichut, there's no connection between the two. It is the tent where the family, people of Israel, is found, where the foundation for Am Yisrael are being laid. It is the tent of Sarah in the sense that Yitzchak is bringing in Rivka to replace, or rather to continue, the work of Sarah. I love that point that Rabbi just made. Nobody replaces the people that we lose. There is, a new Rosh Yeshiva in, I don't know what it is, in Staten Island, who is now fulfilling the role of Reb David. We don't replace Reb David Feinstein. There is a new chief rabbi in England. I mean, it's been already a few years that that we have the new chief rabbi, but he doesn't replace Rabbi Sachs. He fulfills the role of Reb Sachs. He continues the situation. Reb Sachs didn't replace Reb Jacobowitz. That's just the way it is. And I think it's important that he makes that point, and especially when we lose such important personalities as we did this week, it's good to remind us of this. Or rather, to continue the work of Sarah, not because he needs a wife to replace Sarah, but because he knows that his wife has an additional role to continue that unfinished work. The Jewish nation is still in the formative stage, and it's going to be a lot of work to get it from being a small family to becoming a great nation. That role is not one that Rivka has shown an aptitude for before. She's shown that she's got chesed and kindness and sweetness and all of that, but she hasn't shown that she's, Joan of Arc or whatever, that she's ready to build a nation. I mean, unlike the chesed personal role that she's shown, because it is completely outside her previous frame of reference. And therefore, Yitzchak has to, quote, bring her into the tent, comma, and become Sarah, his mother, close quote. The Midrash cites that there was an immediate fulfillment of that role in the miraculous signs, which I think should be understood to mean, metaphorically, that Rivka was in fact immediately able to enter into the new role. All of the miracles that we talk about, and the reincarnation, the Kabbalistic approach, all of that is beautiful, but it's all metaphoric, according to Rabbi, and I think there's a lot of power in what he says, for the essential idea, which is not that Rivka becomes Sarah. That's nice on a certain level, but it's that Rivka is ready to do the job that Sarah had been doing. She's not Sarah. She's going to do the job that Sarah did, but she's going to do it as Rivka. In other words, we take the place of our parents, but we're not our parents. We do it with our own style, panache, whatever term you want to use. And that's fine, and that's okay. We say all the time, 3 times a day in Ashrei, Dor l'dor Shabbat Masech, from generation to generation. That doesn't mean that we're clones of the previous generation. It means that we take on the responsibilities of the previous generation, but we have to do it as ourselves. And I think when you look at the Pasuk, it lends itself to the miraculous Kabbalistic approaches. That's wonderful, and I'm glad we discussed them. But ultimately, the message is, yes, we must carry on the chain of Masorah, of the tradition. We have to make sure that our children and grandchildren, etc., will be, fine purveyors of our Masorah. But that doesn't mean that we are our parents, because we do it in our own way. And that's fine, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Rivka is amazing, but she's not Sarah. She does what she does as Rivka. She's fulfilling that niche, but she's not Sarah, she's Rivka. And next week, when we talk more and read more about Rivka, and how perhaps she saves the entire enterprise by encouraging Yaakov and stopping Esav, but she's Rivka, she's not Sarah. And I think that this is an important way of looking at it. I think Rabbi's comment, all of the other ones are amazing and wonderful, but Rabbi's comment really speaks to me, and I hope to all of us, because we are doing the exact same thing. We are handing over the reins of Judaism to the next generation. And we aren't our parents, and we can't expect our children to be us. We just expect them to do the job the best they can as themselves. And Be'ezut Hashem, with Siyata Dishmaya, with divine help and support, then the enterprise, Baruch Hashem, keeps going and going and going. The Am Yisrael is the original Energizer Bunny. We just keep on going, Baruch Hashem, and it should continue ad olam. Okay, I didn't leave much time, but if there's a comment, question, bavakasha, this is a good time.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Hi, I'm still confused. Are we thinking that Yitzhak was 13 at the Akedah, and a couple of years later marries Rivka, or he was 37? I still don't.
Okay, I understand why you're confused, and I take some of the blame. Yes, the Midrash is very strong that he was 37. However, I don't think that's pshat. I think that's the Midrash. I think it's an interesting idea that has power to it. But I think the pshat, I think the literal reality is that he was 13. I think it refers to him as a nar. And there's a definition for the word nar. And the definition for the word nar is, between 13 and 14. So
he had the intelligence to go and meet her 3 years later when he was 16 and she was 15.
No.
No.
Assuming the pshat is that he was 13.
Yeah.
At the time of the Akedah, this story takes place 27 years later.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Right. And that goes against all of those ideas that he had spent 3 years in the wilderness, perhaps, seeking out Hagar and Hagar and Yishma. That gets rid of that idea.
So we don't know what he was doing for 27 years.
What was he doing for those 27 years?
Yeah.
He was working as a shepherd. I mean, that was the family business.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're very welcome. I understand the confusion. I take all the blame because I was trying to give two different tracks.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't clear enough on that there were two totally different approaches to the point.
Thank you very much.
The only thing we know for sure is is that Sarah dies when he's 37, and he gets married when he's 40. Those are psukim. All of the other is conjecture. So he apparently did spend 3 years within these pshatim, 3 years disconsolate over the death of his mother.
Understandable.
Yeah. Especially if you're not married and don't have your own family, it's that much harder to get over these family tragedies.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking and helping me to clarify. If you can through the WhatsApp or through Gail ask questions during the week. I don't mind in the least. Gail, can we try to get people the Devar Torah? Do you have the emails?
I don't have all the emails, no.
Yeah, because especially this week, because I referred to it, and it really fits in. It's a piece in the pasuk that I didn't deal with about davening mincha that I think you may find interesting.
So if they can either private message me or put it on the sheer site, whatever they prefer.
Oh, I can put it on the sheer site. Okay, yeah, I'll put it on the sheer site.
If you want me to do it by email, I can do that.
I forgot. I can just do it on the share site, and then if anybody wants to print it out, they can. Yeah, no, not that. Thank you. I should have thought of that. Okay, and I'm going to figure out how to post the recordings, which I'm not sure how to do yet, but I'll call in my son to teach me.
Special request for someone who works United States hours and couldn't make this.
No, I understand. No, it'd be nice if I can, on a regular basis, put them up. I have them on the computer. I just have to figure out how to, then transfer them. But I'll figure it out. If not this week, next week, but hopefully soon I'll figure it out. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Kay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry I was late.
No, it's fine. Good evening.